Now that we have a better idea on how to create some 3D bodies and 3D designs in Shaper 3D, let's now take a look at how we can transform some of these designs. So we also have a number of transform tools, and I can navigate to these manually on the left-hand side. Here I have my transform tools. And notice I have a number of transform tools such as move and rotate, scale, translate, and so on. And we're going to be learning a number of these tools over the next few lessons. However, again, as usual, I also have the ability to get to these tools based upon my selections. So instead of having to manually navigate to them here, I'm going to try to make use of my selections. And one of the most common transform tools, and the one I probably use most often, would be move rotate. As the name suggests, to simply move or rotate particular designs. So, for example, we could move or rotate our entire design here. So first I might want to jump into my items and make sure I am in fact selecting every portion of this design. So now it looks like I have in fact selected the entire design of my nightstand here. And notice the first option seems to be the move rotate tool I'm seeing here. And as soon as I jump into my move rotate tool, I now see a triad available right over top of the object or body I've selected. And I can simply move my object or design in any direction using this triad. So I can move over in the X direction here, up in the Z direction as well, or in the Y direction if I'd like also. In addition, I can also rotate about any of these axes as well. And another important note when dealing with rotate specifically is this pivot point. So the middle pivot point here, and I can tap to select it, and I can actually move this pivot point wherever I'd like. So perhaps I'll put it on this back corner, for example. So now that's where my pivot point is. So if I rotate now, it should be rotating slightly differently about that particular pivot point, as we can see here. So that's the basics of the move rotate tool, and we can see it is actually very simple and intuitive to use. However, we will see this tool can become very, very useful within our designs. So for example, let's take a quick look at some of the brackets and screws within my nightstand here. So instead of having to completely redesign components, I could simply double tap to select my bracket here and my two screws as well. And then I could move this bracket and screws to some other location if I might like. A similar idea here. I also have my triangle bracket down below. I can double tap to select this bracket and perhaps both screws as well. And maybe I'd like to throw that bracket in my other corner, for example. So not only could I move this into the correct position, I could also rotate it into my correct position. And now we can see I've just moved both the brackets and my screws into my other corner there by making use of the move and rotate tools. Another example of where my move or rotate tool might be very useful in this case is, let's say I wanted to open the drawer of this nightstand. I could go to my items, make sure I select the drawer folder, and now using the move rotate command, I can move this entire drawer about this axis here, let's say, and it's like I'm opening the drawer of my nightstand. So as we can see, it's very easy to move an entire portion of this full product or assembly design. What's also very handy with the move rotate tool is I can move or rotate existing features as well. So for example, a hole, I can tap to select a hole, and I can move or rotate that particular hole as well. So for example, let's say I wanted to change the angle or rotation of all four of these holes here. I could simply make sure that my pivot point, again, is centered along this circular edge here. So again, just move your pivot point, and as you hit any entity, it should try to jump to those specific entities. So if I go over a circular edge, it should jump to the center point of that circular edge. And now I should be able to rotate these holes to change the angle. Maybe we'd like it something like this here. So we can see the Move Rotate tool, very, very powerful tool in Shaper 3D. Of course, I can move or rotate any specific bodies I may want. And I can also move or rotate particular features such as faces and holes and so on.